T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All three engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Marching on the world, we are the citizens of tech, armed with sci-fi movie references, board game skills, and a passion for knowledge that just won't quit, not to mention wit and charm. We are your guide to the most interesting technology treasures we could find on the internet this week. And it ain't just gadgets and apps, folks. Those things are great, but we also hit academic discoveries, energy, gaming, astronomy, as well as millennia-old tech that is worth mentioning. Find this show at citizensoftech.com, iTunes, Overcast, and several other fine podcast apps and networks. If you'd like this show to remain commercial-free forever and ever and ever, become a Patreon sponsor. If enough of you do it, we won't have to explain to our families why it's late at night and we're sitting in a studio recording a show. So, nice to have you aboard for this week's show where we will discuss pothole energy recovery, no man's windows, beating air gap security, garden automation, acoustic prisms, barber poles, and the Beaker people, who were not Muppets as far as we know. First up, Eric, capturing energy from the vertical motion of a vehicle suspension.
Yeah, so this comes to us via electrek.co. Electric and hybrid vehicles maximize efficiency by recovering energy where possible. Braking is the most common energy recovery system, right? You know, I have the Volt. It recovers energy. When I brake, when I hit my regen paddle, when I put it in low, there's like 3 methods, and they all sort of stack. And think in regen a boatload of electricity when it's slowing down. Now, Audi has come up with a way to harness some of the energy created by the up and down motion of a vehicle's suspension. So you go over a into a pothole, over a bump, whatever. As the suspension system travels, it's actually going to capture some of that kinetic energy and convert it to electricity.
Right. Okay. I mean, wouldn't be a ton of energy, but I can see if we're going for maximum efficiency, I get it. This kind of makes sense.
Yeah, especially if it doesn't add weight, and that's the key. We're not going to regen a whole lot here, but if we're wasting all of that energy already, why not capture it? Basically. So if you think about an arm connected to the vehicle suspension, as the suspension system moves up and down, it actually turns some gears connected to a tiny little alternator. And this generates electricity, which is stored in a small battery pack. It's actually 500 watts, to be exact. So that ain't much.
Not a ton at all, no.
Yeah, basically my Volt burns 500 watts sitting at idle with all the computer systems on and whatever. So basically, this results in an average of 100 to 150 watts of output. So anywhere from 3 watts on smooth highways where it's, just a little bit of body float when you're going over little humps in the road and things like that, to 600 watts on bumpy secondary roads, or, about 9,000 around here, I think.
So does this thing replace a shock absorber, or do we know?
It seems like the way it was sort of written up and phrased, it seems like it may replace it, especially because there's no shock absorber shown in the actual schematic that was presented. You do see an arm connected to the existing suspension, and the system is somehow apparently adjustable by the driver. So,
which kind of makes you think maybe this is, in fact, like a new kind of suspension.
Yeah.
Which sort of makes sense in this, because when we're in your Volt and it's in regen mode, you pointed out to me, I'm not touching the brakes right now, and the car is slowing down dramatically.
Right.
So it's not a brake replacement, but, and so maybe this isn't... Maybe it's not exactly a shock absorber replacement, but it certainly would, if it's absorbing that energy, it would have that dampening effect on the up and down motion.
I would certainly think so. And I would think that the user configurable portion of it would probably dictate how much resistance the alternator puts on the suspension system. So, it's almost like existing adjustable suspension systems where you can put it into sport mode or comfort mode, lots of travel, very firm, what have you, except the amount of regen that you dictate then actually dictates how hard or soft the suspension would be.
Another thing in the favor of it kind of being a replacement system would be weight, because this isn't recovering that much energy, right?
Right.
And so if it's an add-on system that's adding weight, you'd think it would negate the value it has just because of the extra weight that's involved to move the vehicle ahead. So logically,
30 extra pounds, and
it does kind of feel like you've got to be replacing something else that the weight comes out equal, so that you're getting a net gain in that energy recovery.
Yeah, and if you think about it, it really seems like it should be a replacement, just based on all the information that we could find. So the interesting thing that they're looking to do with this is possibly use it to replace the vehicle alternator.
Oh,
so instead of turning the alternator constantly using a serpentine belt, or
so you gain engine efficiency, petrol motor efficiency, because you the serpentine belt doesn't have to drive that accessory motor, the alternator, to generate electricity. You're pulling it out from the road, going over the bumps.
Right.
Hopefully your roads are in terrible shape so that works out for you.
Your alignments will not be covered under this. So I mean, this has applications in gas-powered hybrid vehicles and in full electric. So it'll be interesting. We'll watch this one. I'll watch this with interest.
Well, it's different. I don't think anybody else is doing this. This is a first thing. That Audi's first to market with this, I believe. So, Anyway. Well, No Man's Sky on Windows seems to be a fail. No Man's Sky is the space game where the planets that are rendered on the fly through algorithms, and there's, if I remember right, quadrillions of planets that can possibly be generated by their algorithms. So, okay, it's been launched, the game is out, and there's a Windows version, and some people are not happy. Frame rate seems to be a problem with this game. Many people have reported even when the machines are over-spec'd, beyond what the No Man's Sky folks are asking for. And again, we're assuming that this is 1080p and the minimum specs, if you're curious, Windows 7 or 8. 7, 8.1, or 10, the 64-bit versions. You need an Intel Core i3. An 8 gigabit of RAM, an NVIDIA GTX 480, or an AMD Radeon 7870. Not the biggest cards available by any means, but meaningful polygon renderers, and then 10 gig of storage available. OpenGL 4.5, no Intel card supported, and then Core 2 CPUs and below are not supported. Okay, so you need a reasonably beefy machine, but nothing massive by any means. And if we're assuming 1080p, you should be able to get 30 frames per second out of that configuration. And in fact, the game comes with a 30 frames per second cap. So the game is actually capped at 30 FPS on Windows. So this article that I'm reading comes from Ars Technica. They're reporting seeing that 30 frame cap dropping to actually 20 frames, not the cap dropping, but just they're not even making the 30 frames per second. And they're seeing the game slowing down to 20 frames per second. Sometimes they're seeing freezes. There's not a bunch of new polygons showing up on the screen, so no obvious reason why it would be slowing down, but still they're seeing these slowdowns. They actually experimented. So Ars Technica, they said, all right, fine, let's remove the cap and see what happens. They got up to 60 frames per second on their test rig. And even then, so they could get up to 60 frames per second, but even then, there seemed to be drops in the frame rate, freezes, other kind of problems. They were also complaining, aside from the performance, key remapping being supported, but on-screen prompts not following as expected, so hints not working as you'd assume anymore, remap behavior not working quite like expected, not very intuitive. Mouse interaction is crap, apparently. No scroll wheel support, which sounds horrible, especially if there's a lot of menus to deal with. And then one guy, Ars commenter Zeno Veritas, in response to this article, suggested that futzing with the graphics options requires a game restart. So you want to go in, you're trying to make things better. Great, restart the entire game, which kind of blows. And he suggested editing the No Man's Sky /binary/settings/TK graphics settings.mxml file as the quick way to tweak things or recover from a setting that made the game unplayable. In other words, he ran into problems where he couldn't play the game anymore and actually went into that file, changing the graphics settings just to get the game back, and then found it was just quicker to use that anyway than going through the GUI. So another guy, an Ars staffer who was part of the testing, this is Lee Hutchinson, senior technology editor. He comments, with all the options maxed out, field of view of 90 degrees and playing at 2560 by 1440. So this is actually more than 1080p. I'm getting a pretty constant 50 to 60 FPS without many spikes or dips. I'm definitely not seeing the massive performance tanking or crashing that other people, including Total Biscuit, is running into. And this is on Win 10 with a 980 Ti, SATA SSD, 16 gig of RAM, and a Skylake i5, so definitely a bigger spec than the minimum. But the total lack of care with the interface, the remapping and so on not working, is just disappointing. Now, that was all interesting to me. I've been interested in this game, and I've kind of fallen out of games since Unreal Tournament 2004, which shows you, I'm getting old and stuff. But this game I've really thought a lot about picking up and thought maybe I'd play. Eric, you actually run a Windows rig for gaming, right?
Yeah, I do.
And you've tried this?
Yeah, I got it.
So I just spewed all that stuff. Does any of that sound familiar?
Oh, yes, it does. So I have experienced basically every problem you listed.
The freezing and slow frame rate?
I have an AMD system that is an 8-core processor. I have 8 gigs of RAM. I have a pretty decent AMD video card. I have an SSD that meets, everything meets or exceeds, and actually exceeds by quite a bit the minimum. And when I loaded this game up for the first time, it did have the default 30 frame per second cap, and it was not hitting anywhere near 30 frames a second on medium settings. So, it tries to automatically set your graphic fidelity level based on your hardware specs.
So this is going to be like some other games I've played, I assume, where if you set like a medium fidelity, that is a few things. One is your absolute resolution, but then also like texture details and shadowing,
texture
and
quality,
anti-aliasing
quality, and all of that. Yeah, so I actually turned down the anti-aliasing. I left it at 1080p. I didn't know any better that I should adjust the FPS cap from 30 to 60. Basically, it was almost unplayable, but not completely.
That bad? Unplayable or just like inconvenient?
So it really became bad when you would leave a planet and go to a new planet, because as the procedural generation was happening, it just went into slideshow mode. So you're supposed to have this big dramatic, breaking through the atmosphere. You have the halo of light around your ship as the heat shields are, being affected and all this. And instead of that, it was just kind of like, we're loading the planet now. Here it is. No. And it was bad. But interestingly enough, in Hello Games' defense, they did issue some patches within the first day or two that actually resolved most of the performance issues for me.
In a day? How is that even possible? You'd think they'd hear about that and go, I don't know, man. We tested a long time, and it was awesome. These people out here, they just suck. Seriously?
It actually did. Yeah, I think it was 2 or 3 days before the first patch came out that really, really helped my performance. And then within a few more days, they had actually rewritten machine code specifically for AMD processors. And that patch really, they released it in an experimental beta branch that you could subscribe to through Steam, and boosted my performance hugely.
So is it playable now?
It's playable, but I pretty much already burned out, because the biggest problem with No Man's Sky is it is not what was promised.
So okay, so what did you feel was promised?
It's not even what I feel. It's what was documented in interviews with Sean Murray, the founder of Hello Games. There was supposed to be so many features that just aren't in there, like factions of different alien races that are at combat with each other, and you can align with one of them and help them, and you'll get benefits from them, and the other faction will attack you. And
which sounds interesting, because then that implies economy, that implies politics, that implies a whole lot of interesting gameplay.
Yeah, it's totally not in the game.
At all?
At
so
all.
What is in the game?
I mean, there are alien races, and you can sort of learn some of their languages, and you can interact with them and things like that. But the laundry list of items that did not make it into the game when people were buying the game for that laundry list of features. I mean, if this game had been released as a 1999 indie title, I don't think that the backlash that they've gotten would have occurred. But they're selling it at a AAA title price. It's $60. And you're essentially doing the same thing over and over and over. Mine for resources, sell them, build a few little things, and upgrade your ship.
Yeah, I was reading someone's gameplay experience that the first part of the game, you're basically you're there, and your first game experience is on a planet. You've got a busted ship. You've got to get resources to fix the ship so you can get off planet.
Yep.
But even when you do that and you're off planet, you're not engaged at any higher level.
Not really. And one of the other big things is all the spaceships are supposed to be different from each other and have unique attributes. Like one might be a better cargo freighter, one might be a better, dogfighter for space combat and all this. Really what it comes down to is they look different, and some of them have a few more inventory slots to store things. There is no appreciable difference between the ships at this point. And there's no real difference between any of the alien races.
I remember reading that too, that no matter what planet you land on, the buildings that are there, everything looks about the same. There's a certain series of buildings, classes of buildings, and everything looks kind of the same.
And when you go into the building, you know where the alien is going to be sitting in the building because they always sit in the same place. They never get up and move around. They're never outside doing anything. They're always in those little huts. So you discover these planets that are procedurally generated, but there's aliens all over these things. It's not like you're the first person to ever land on them. There's these AI, aliens on there too, but they're completely unoriginal. They're always in the same place. They always basically have the same interactions. It's really disappointing.
Is it MMO or no?
Nope.
So you're okay. You're on your own.
That's one of the other big
really
things
big universe
that was specifically said, yes, this is multiplayer, and yes, you can play with your friends, but statistically, it's unlikely that you'll ever meet anyone. There's totally not. So two PS4 streamers actually landed on the same planet, found the same location, and tried to find each other. Totally couldn't even see each other. So, yeah, it's kind of awkward.
Have they responded to this?
Kind of. They said that basically they're going to focus on the performance and game-breaking bugs first to make sure that people can actually play the game. And then they'll talk about potentially adding additional things and whatnot.
I know what happened here. They've delivered minimum viable product.
Absolutely.
That's what they've done.
And I fully believe that because Sony came in and sponsored their development and wanted to push this as a PS4 exclusive title apart from PC. You can't get this on Xbox. That they just said, you got to get this out the door. We've given you money. You need to get this out the door. We need our money back. That's my suspicion. If they had stayed fully indie, I think they could have just, worked on this for another year or two, gotten all the features in that they fully anticipated to, and then released it successfully without all the backlash. But the bills had to be paid, and I think that's ultimately what happened here.
That sucks because they've taken something that was going to be great and amazing and appealing for all of the reasons that you said why it was appealing to me and sounded interesting are not there. Now I'm sad.
Basically gutted it.
I'm not just that interested. Never mind not having a PC that's nearly fast enough to deal with this machine because I've been Mac for a few years now. And I don't have a PS4. I'm Xbox.
Right.
So it's kind of like, yeah, never mind.
Yeah, I'm going to wait and see what the first big update that comes down, if the first big update ever comes down, does to the game, and then maybe I'll jump back in if it's compelling enough. But
all right. Well, let's move on to the next story, Eric. Now, you and I have both worked in enterprise IT. We both had our hands in security. If you wanted to absolutely, positively, unconditionally secure a system, what would you do? What is the first thing you would do?
Unplug it from the network.
Exactly. You would air gap that sucker. If
Yep.
Now, never minding the practicality or inconvenience of that, whatever. There are certain systems in the world that you don't have the stupid thing plugged into the network because you don't. That's just not the kind of data you're dealing with. It's not safe at all. So you have it air gapped from any network at all, very possibly, and it's working on its own isolated data set, or maybe you're on a highly secure network. For instance, there's a friend of mine who's a consultant for the Department of Defense, and he goes through a number of, besides having to have a top secret clearance, he's got to go through a number of highly secure protocols just to get on the network when he's on site, and it's an isolated network.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal, these sorts of systems. But you would air gap a system for the ultimate insecurity, because if it ain't plugged in, ain't no hacker going to figure out how to get in there.
Or will they?
Unless. So here's a story from Ars Technica again, with some feedback from, I've got a link here to arxiv.org with some details on this particular hack about how you could exfiltrate system off of an air-gapped computer. And long story short, what they've done is these hackers have created malware that if you can get the malware onto the system that's not on the network, so this could be like a social engineering hack, drop a USB key in the parking lot, hope someone picks it up in the parking lot and plugs it into a secure system, which has happened. That is something that has actually happened. Stuxnet reportedly took advantage of this. They just littered the parking lot with USB keys. One of them, that was this infected USB keys, someone picked it up in the parking lot, brought it in, plugged it in, boom.
It's something like 80% of people will plug in a USB stick that they've found into their computer.
And
so
then that
SneakerNet is alive and well.
You just auto-execute that malware, baby.
Yep.
So that...
the payload makes it onto the system.
The payload makes it onto the computer.
How
and what this payload is a code that can control the actuator arm in the hard disk drive of the system. So a hard disk drive, we're not talking SSDs, we're talking the older spinning rust. It's got a platter inside, and there's an arm in there with a head that reads the magnetic data off of that disk. Great. Well, it's got an actuator arm in there that moves the head around to read the data off the platter. The malware controls the actuator arm. So that actuator arm, as it moves, makes noise. So if you can make the arm move at your will, independent of reading the drive for data, just you as malware can figure out how to make that head move in there, you can basically send code. It's kind of sort of like Morse code in a way. The sounds, the acoustic signature of the actuator arm gives you enough data that someone listening nearby with a microphone could pick up the message that it's sending you. So you can get ones and zeros off of that thing, a binary code. So wicked hard to do this hack, right? Because you have to, one, get malware onto the system. Two, you got to have some recording device near enough to the system
that can differentiate.
It didn't have to be able to hear the hard drive actuator arm moving and then go 011 0011 00 and so on.
Which, if you've ever been in a data center, you
forget about that. Yeah, it's not. Yeah. I mean, DCs are just
you put
slammed
your
with noise
in to go to work in the data center.
But at a desktop. Someone who's sitting, at a desk with in a quiet office with a workstation that's got access to secret information. Let's say the malware does the actuator arm, and it picked up. Maybe it's also a keylogger. Yep. Or it's also able to read certain files or something.
Okay, that's making more sense.
Yeah,
because
you got to have the. It's not just the ones and the zeros that with the actuator. That's the way to exfiltrate the data, but you got to have some data to exfiltrate that's interesting.
Right, and the infection method is more likely to succeed on a desktop computer or a laptop computer.
Exactly,
because even if you got it on the server, most enterprise IT servers are virtualized now, and the data lives on a SAN
somewhere else
somewhere else that you're not going to be able to record the distributed read heads exactly. of the 48 drives that this VM lives across.
Not at all.
Yeah, the end user PC makes more sense.
So it's kind of like, hey, General, you dropped this USB key. Wink, wink. And, he brings in, and he plugs it in,
free
malware,
USB drive,
and, all of a sudden, right. The likelihood of this is really small. And even if you get malware and it's exfiltrating data, you've still got to have something listening. Now, there's a video that goes along with this. It's on YouTube. Just search for disk filtration. It's about a minute long, and it does proof of concept. It shows an iPhone. I think it might have been an Android phone. Whatever. It's a smartphone sitting there actually listening to the PC with the hard drive moving, and it's pulling off zeros and ones off of it. So, I mean, this is proof of concept that works. It's alive and well.
If you can compromise the phone and the computer, then you're basically golden.
Yeah. And then, now, by the way, this isn't the only air gap defeat method that's out there. There are some other clever ones. One of them involves FM frequency signals. There's a hacker tool called AirHopper. Turns a video card into an FM transmitter so that you can see remotely the video card via FM, as I understand it.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a thing. I don't know what the range is on that. Again, I'm assuming it'd be very limited, but and very difficult to execute on.
Yeah.
So, and again, this method with the disk actuator, as you can imagine, it's not fast. It's not like you're not pulling data off the hard drive, right?
Right.
You're just using the arm to make a noise that translates into zeros and ones. So 180 bits per minute, pretty slow. But enough to pull off passwords and usernames.
It's a long game.
In the article suggested fast enough to steal a 4096-bit key in about 25 minutes.
It's faster than trying to crack it.
Yeah, oh boy. Yeah, you'll never crack that 4K key. So, anyway, a neat idea. Just one of those things to keep in the back of your mind. Anybody working in a hyper-secure facility, don't get social engineered, because if you're not connected to the network, it doesn't mean you're safe. They're still coming after you in some way or another.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Eric, you had pointed me to something here, a garden bot, and I thought it was kind of an interesting little kind of a DIY maker sort of project.
Yeah, my wife actually showed this to me. So gardenbot.org is the URL. Gardenbot isn't a robot like we think of, like a human analog, right? What comes into our head could look like a cheesy, bad 50s sci-fi movie. Danger, Will Robinson.
So it doesn't have arms and legs, not that sort of a robot.
Yeah, no. It's not that kind. It's not a meat bot or an android, right? It's not a Borg or anything like that. GardenBot is a robot in the sense that it's a thing with a brain that has sensors that send information to that brain. And GardenBot fulfills the function of monitoring your garden, and it's open source. So the question obviously arises, does a garden really need a robot to monitor it?
Let me tell you my experience with gardening.
Yeah.
It needs something, because I am not Mr. Green Thumb.
Because if you forget, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, if you've ever tried to raise a garden, it is sort of a bigger deal than just stick seeds in the ground, harvest the crops in 3 months. It doesn't work that way. You got to weed that and make sure it's watered and all this. So GardenBot is based on Arduino, and it has several modules. So the quote-unquote brain is an interconnect point for sensors with the Arduino microcontroller, and that's where all the code runs. It also has a garden station, which is a junction box that's centrally located for all of the sensors, and it uplinks to the brain unit. There's a soil moisture sensor, which obviously detects how much water is in the soil. And thereby, you can have alerts that say, oh, you need to water, turn on. You could have it
automated, I suppose.
Turn on your sprinkler system.
Yeah.
And all this. There's a soil temperature sensor, and so it can monitor the temperature of the soil. A light level sensor that can detect, okay, we're getting X amount of sunlight. Water valve, so that, solenoid-driven water valve to turn on that sprinkler system if the soil moisture level is too low. And then it has a control panel, which has a light switch that allows you to turn the water on and off.
Okay, so I kind of get it now. So there's all these sensors. They're wired in. Code makes all the data flowing in from the sensors useful. You, as a coder, have got to know, based on the data coming in from the sensors, what actions to take. It's time to water. It's time to not water, as the case may be.
Yep.
It's time to send an alert to somebody because of this condition. I get it. So it's a project. It's a fun project, though. It sounds like, if you're into gardening and you're a nerd, this does sound really cool.
It's an inexpensive DIY project that lets you figure out how to make the most out of the sensor data. and to script automated events like watering or, logging information and sending an alert.
Okay, and all these sensors, if you just look at gardenbot.org, you can see all these sensors that you were just describing. These are all DIY sensors, too. They're all just cheap parts. Throw them together with, as inexpensively as possible and just make them work. They're really simple and fun. It's not like you're buying all these, come to the GardenBot store and buy the cool modules. This one's $300 and this one's $1,000. And it's just like pieces and parts you get from the hardware store kind of thing.
Yeah, Radio Shack and the hardware store. And it's not the Apple store. It's, you could get into this for, cheap money. Relatively speaking, you're not in for thousands of dollars.
No, you're in for hundreds.
Yeah,
maybe
small hundreds.
Yeah.
Yep.
And elbow grease.
Yeah,
some sweat equity to get the code right and to make it do something.
Yep, learn a scripting language and all this. So, on to more stuff about acoustics. Right, separating sounds into component frequencies with an acoustic prism. What is this?
Okay, so you know how a light prism, a simple prism, will separate light into its component light waves. So you get the rainbow effect, right?
Roy G. Biv.
White light comes in, it gets split out, just like you said, into those fundamental colors. Well, we've never really been able to do that with sound. It's not really the way sound works. So if you've got a whole bunch of sounds, frequencies coming in, you can't easily separate and parse them out.
Right.
There has been nothing like that until now. So École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne, which I assume is France. I didn't actually look that part up. They've done a academic project here to achieve a acoustic prism, separating sounds into their component frequencies. And here's how it works. So try to imagine an aluminum tube with 10 holes that are spaced evenly apart. And this tube isn't any simple tube. It's a very precisely engineered waveguide. So it's a very precise thing that they've 3D printed, actually, if you read the backstory. Okay, so you've got this tube, and you've got these 10 holes in this tube, in this waveguide, and behind each hole is a chamber. So it's not simply a long tube all the way through. There's actually 10 parts in this thing.
Okay.
And in between each part is a membrane. And this membrane is a special DuPont Kapton FPC manufactured membrane, and they create the chambers in the tube, and they're the magic here. They cause a delay in the transmission of frequencies to adjacent chambers, and the reason why is math. So if you read the academic paper on it, and if you're a mathematician, you're going to grok how the waveguide, the holes, and the membranes all work together so that sound that is flowing into the holes, face on, hit the back of the waveguide and then go down the tube, hit the membranes, and then cause vibrations and change in timing delays such that lower frequencies come out of the further away holes, therefore separating that sound into its fundamental frequencies.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. And again, it is all math. I tried to read the academic paper and got in over my head very quickly. I get as far as trying to teach myself pre-calculus in high school and did not do well with that. I did good up through trig, pre-calc, no. And then I did not have to do that in college because that is not what my major was all about. And so again, that end result, higher frequencies escape from the holes nearer to the source of the sound. Lower frequencies escape from the holes further from the source of the sound. So if you're end on, like the tube is with the holes is facing you or facing the sound in a perpendicular way, you're going straight on. The higher frequency sounds would come from the center holes and the lower ones from the end. Mm-hmm. Now imagine the sound coming out that tube from an angle. So instead of looking straight perpendicular to that tube, it's actually turned away from you at an angle so that one end of the tube is closer to you, one end of the tube is further from you. When you use that, because of this delay factor of the sounds and the frequencies hitting the waveguide, you can actually, using this same math, figure out what angle the sound is coming from and the point of origin, because it won't simply be the lower holes come out at the further ends. Now it's the lower holes are further from the entrance point where the sound actually came into the tube. They become further away. And so on an angle, that sound is distributed somewhat differently as it travels through the waveguide, and they can use the math to determine point of origin for that sound, directionality, without the normal method, which would be a whole bunch of microphones and triangulation to try to figure out where the sound came from. They can use a waveguide with this hole and membrane structure to figure that same thing out, only needing one waveguide. And that's actually a potential use case for this technology. They can there's a video on this where they demonstrate how all of this works. And so if you're having a hard time picturing, because I'm probably explaining it badly, go up to the show notes at citizensofTech.com, watch the video, and you will see him demonstrate, the professor that was tied up in this project, demonstrate the straight ahead version, the perpendicular version, and then the angled version, and then how that helps them identify point of origin. It's not real detail, but you kind of get the idea. And then he makes the point, we can make this happen on a really small scale so that very affordably we could make a waveguide that could be used for acoustic sound pinpoint kind of an application. And that's useful to somebody. I don't know who. Not me, but...
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a practical application. I'm wondering if acoustical engineering...
The government, Eric. The government wants to know.
Yeah, I mean, that ultimately was what I came down to. I started with acoustical engineering and ended up with the military.
It was just cool. I just saw this and kind of nerded out. You know, it's one of those things where the math was so heavy and what was going on was just convoluted enough. It was a little bit hard to get a grasp on. So I found out I spent about an hour reading on this, trying to get it in my brain. It was just cool.
And that's the big thing is I don't even care if there's a practical use. The fact that we can do this is cool enough.
Yeah.
With math, we can figure out the origin of different sound waves. That's pretty cool.
Content we like. I got a fun one for you this week. Screen Junkies, home of honest trailers. So if this is a YouTube channel, this is not heavy science. It's Friday afternoon. You've had enough of work, and no one's around that's going to give you any grief about it. So you go up to YouTube, you go to the Screen Junkies channel, and then watch some honest trailers. So really what these guys do is it's an irreverent look at the movies. It's an irreverent look at TV. They are funny, they are cheeky, they are clever, and they have their own epic voice spokesman guy.
Yep.
In a world where... That guy.
In a world.
Yeah. And so their honest trailers are kind of what you'd think of them. It's a trailer that the movie should have had, and they're hilarious if you've actually seen the movie and then watched the honest trailer.
Yep.
Oh, they're so good. They ton
mock
of inside
all the little
jokes.
tropes and
Yes, so funny. So funny. Just to quote them, how they describe themselves: home of the epic honest trailers and the Screen Junkies show. It's the Screen Junkies YouTube channel. Enjoy our warped take on film and TV with a steady stream of pop culture parody, original series, thoughtful commentary, and whatever we can think of next. And some of their latest honest trailers haven't been as funny as some of the earlier ones, but they're all there. Just, again, when you've got 2 hours to kill before you get out of the office and no one's going to give you any grief about it, just sit and start going through some of your favorite movies and watch the honest trailers on the Screen Junkies channel. Hilarious stuff. Eric, did you learn anything today? So, Eric, did you learn anything today?
I did. I learned about the Beaker people.
We're not Muppets.
No. The Beaker people actually used metal objects imported from Ireland and mainland Europe and helped to popularize their use in Britain. And they may have been the first people in Britain to use woven fabrics. And when we say the first to do this, I'm talking about 2800 to 1800 BC is an estimate that was quoted on Wikipedia. So we're talking over 3,000, almost 4,000, over 4,000 years ago, actually.
Glad it didn't happen any sooner. We might still be under British rule. They would have gotten control of the world even faster.
An empire for 4,000 years. Did you learn anything today?
I did learn something, and this happened when I went to get a haircut last week. I was staring at the barber pole that was decorating the inside of the barber shop, and I was like, that's a thing. Why is that a thing, this barber pole? So barber poles have an interesting history, and I'm going to quote Wikipedia directly that gives a nice summary. The red and white pole outside barber shops reference a time when barbers were expected to perform bloodletting and other medical procedures to heal the sick. Red represented blood, and white represented bandages. Barber surgeons in Rome also performed teeth extraction, cupping, leeching, bloodletting, surgery, and enemas. However, today's barber poles represent little more than being a barbershop that cuts hair and does shaves. And that brings us to the end of Citizens of Tech number 41. So, fellow citizen, we will see you in the Citizens of Tech subreddit, where we're going to start posting all the content we think might be worth talking about. I just got to get an IFTTT script running and work on that with Eric. We will have that happening, and then you can upvote, downvote, and submit your own ideas into the subreddit, and we'd like it if you did that. And until then, do a Google search to figure out why C-3PO had, at least temporarily, a red arm. It is a really good story.